Hey there, Ken Lane. It's so good to see you again after a long time.
Yeah, good to see you too, Angie.
I distinctly remember that when we had a conversation once,
Yep.
we I felt like we got along really well, and we talked about some business partners and also common themes in immigration.
Yep.
And I remembered it so well that I just felt like asking you if you want to come and have a longer conversation here
Yeah, no, I remember the
on the red
conversation as
couch.
well, and I think we took rather longer than anticipated. And I remember very much what the driver was, which behind the call. But then after that, I think we got off on a couple of different tangents and just had some
Yeah,
good fun for a while. So
yeah.
lovely to catch up again. That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we both like the outdoors. You're a
Yep.
snowboarder, though. I've never tried snowboarding. I'm a skier. Started when I was 3. So
Yep.
you can imagine, German people, they love to, be outside. So I just love to ski at least once a year. Is there anything that you want to share about yourself that maybe people cannot find out from following you on LinkedIn?
Hmm. That's a little tricky, right? Because I'm one of those people that believes that your personal brand and your online persona, if you will, should be one and the same, right? So, and we can talk a little bit more about that versus corporate, but that's
Yeah.
been a very premeditated thing for me for several years now, because I've worked in corporate for many years. And, when you're working for a big corporate company, you have to be careful about how you present, and the company has policies. And I remember there was one situation where I'd made some comments on a post and shared something, and I got a very frantic call from my SVP at the time. Said, the CEO saw that, and he really wasn't very happy with it. You might offend some of our clients. Like, well, okay, so it goes, but it's an important issue. And she's like, well, we'd really like you to take it down. I think
Wow.
for me, yeah, and it's the first time I've ever been told explicitly that, no, you can't post that. And it was a topic that was kind of dear to me because it was dealing with immigrant children and, being sequestered at the border and some fairly negative things. So, and the commentary was very sensible, but regardless, that was the call. And, when I made the decision to leave and start my own, one of the things I was really pleased with was the freedom that that gives you, right? Because now you can say, very much what's on your mind. You don't go out of your way to offend people, but I also don't pull any punches. So all by way of saying that, people that follow me on LinkedIn or on Instagram, they probably have a pretty good idea of a lot about my life. But one thing that people may not really know is that as much as I'm an outdoors person, like you, I started skiing, God, when I was like 5 or something, and skied for many, many years until snowboarding came around in the 80s, and then I got into snowboarding. But I've also been cooking for the same time.
Wow.
So, yeah, so when I was growing up, I had a single mother, and it'd say, she'd come home after a long day and say, boy, I'd sure like to have some cookies. And she'd say, well, that's great. There's a recipe right there. So, very early, I started cooking, and that's been a lifelong love. And now, with a family, we've got 3 kids. They're all food fans as well. I think we exposed our kids all the way along to things that we ate from different cultures, and we're we really enjoy food from around the world. In particular, a lot of food from Asia. And I remember we tested our youngest on sushi when she was like 3, and the one she liked the most was fish roe, right? This kid's going to be adventurous. So yeah, now she's the most adventurous food in the crowd. But yeah, we cook quite extensively at home, and so I do Asian dumplings from scratch. Including trying to make some more complex ones with the wrappers and all that from scratch. So and some people that know me fairly well would be aware of all that. But if you just follow me on LinkedIn, you may not know that. So follow me on Instagram, you'll see more of that.
I will check out your dumpling recipe then on Instagram. Um, I think that's amazing. And I think it's so important, what we put into our bodies. I've honestly underestimated this for a long time, but then also I think I grew up quite lucky with a mom who always made everything from scratch. Like,
Nice.
totally against like buying like processed food
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
it's just not something I was used to when I was a kid. But I really think, we need to really think about twice what we put into our bodies, and it has such an amazing difference for your brain, how you work with nutrition, if you drink it,
Hmm.
if you get enough sleep. So it's something that comes up a lot in coaching now,
Oh yeah.
as one of the bases for actually having a healthy brain and being able to perform. So great that you're showing your kids already how it's done. Fantastic. And also showing them the diversity of food around the world. I think that's a wonderful thing to do when you work in global mobility.
Well, it's funny because now the kids are, kind of taking me on journeys, right?
Yeah.
So, this morning, like literally, our kids are going off to school and we're getting all prepped and, I'm having my lunch or sorry, my breakfast, and my breakfast was just a little bit of warmed rice with some furikake and a little bit of tofu with some ginger and shoyu and things. And, gave my foodiest daughter, a taste of that. She's like, "Oh, that's really good." And then she goes off in a tangent about some, YouTubes that she'd been watching about these Korean lunch boxes. So, and it's been fun because whenever we go traveling now, this
Uh-huh.
becomes a core feature for us, right? So particularly for me, when I go on a business trip, I'm obsessed with finding a couple of local restaurants that do, local specialties that you can't get anywhere else. So, I went to Croatia and I had, some squid ink risotto and seafood, and, went to, it doesn't matter where you go, but there's always something that's really interesting, right? So we're certainly trying to infuse that with the kids and give them more of a global experience when we go traveling.
Fantastic. Love it. And what about your big why? So you already mentioned that you started out on your own, that you worked in
Yeah.
corporate before, you're an immigration lawyer by background.
Nope, not actually.
Not a
So
lawyer,
let
but
me
you have
let,
a law firm. No, you have
yeah,
an
I do.
immigration
But
company.
in Canada, it's a bit different, right? Because
Yeah,
in some countries like
same
the
here.
US, you have to
Yep,
be an attorney, right? In
yep.
Canada, you can be a lawyer or you can be a registered Canadian immigration consultant, and that's what our firm is, right?
Yeah.
So one of my team is a lawyer, but she's also licensed as an RCIC. So and it doesn't make there are subtle differences in terms of some of the casework that you can do, but typically an RCIC can do all the things that a lawyer can do except argue in court. And given that we do corporate immigration primarily and secondarily personal, it's not really a factor for us.
Mm.
So let me just give you kind of the Coles notes of my journey.
Yeah.
Okay. So university was started off in engineering and ended up in psychology of all things, with a minor in classics. And throughout the time that I was in university, I was also working on campus. And this is something that people may also not know, is that I started off my career in the hospitality world. So while I was in school at university, I was working in the local campus bars as a bartender. Right. And then once I finished my coursework, they said, "Well, would you like to run with the operation?" Sure. Took over one of them. Then a couple of years later, they said, "Well, we'd like to actually, have you take over all of them." At the time, that was three operations. And I think at peak, I was responsible for five, including campus-wide catering, team of 500 people, all unionized. And, we'd have these massive swings in terms of staffing where, summers would drop down to, skeleton crews, but then you'd have to hire 400 people in the fall for the rest of the year. So, through that time, I gained a really strong understanding of the recruitment side, but also budgeting and forecasting, business development, business growth, and all those things. And when I left that world, I left to go into recruitment, oddly, and thought, well, this will be nice. I'll just go work as a professional consultant. I'll help people recruit for their clients. I'll make lots of money. I won't have all that pressure of all these things that can go wrong in the hospitality industry. And trust me, things go wrong on a campus bar environment. But I found very quickly that, I couldn't leave well enough alone. So rather than just staying as, someone that just worked front lines and did the recruiting, I got promoted, got promoted, got promoted. Before you know it, I was the director running multiple operations for this particular company. And it just continued. And over time, I went from one company to another, was the director for a group that did primarily oil and gas and energy recruitment.
Right.
and
Uh-huh.
grew that business quite dramatically. Was with those guys for 10 years running their Canadian operations. And a lot of that was very immigration centric, right?
Mhm.
Because what was happening in Canada at the time, we were seeing a huge boom in the oil and gas and energy sector, and there weren't enough engineers to do the work across all disciplines in Canada, so they had no choice but to go international. So our core business was, identifying people from around the world and then bringing them into Canada, but we took care of all of it, right? So we were a one-stop shop. So when I talk about my background as being global workforce mobility, that's what I mean. We
Yeah,
did
yeah.
the searching, we did, the mobilization. At one point we had a project for a client, and I think we identified it was 800 or 900 individuals over the course of a 2-year window from 13 countries. We were flying teams into doing country interviews. We were we were flying people out of Venezuela under cover of night on chartered planes. Like, it was just a lot of crazy stuff,
Oh,
but that's really where my ground in immigration came from, because, we were working for clients doing these large scale projects. At the time, you could do the immigration in-house without being licensed, just given the nature of the industry at the time. And from there, it moved for me into very much a strong immigration focus. And ultimately, I ended up running Newland Chase for Canada, which most people will know as a name, right? So a key competitor for the likes of Fragament and the Big
yeah,
Four.
yeah, yeah.
And, at that point, I wasn't licensed, but I'd been working in the field for quite some time, and I was running the commercial aspect. So I had a team of RCICs below me, and it was really about building the clients and, delivering. And there again, did very well with that group. We grew the business over 200% over the course of a 3-year window, and left, got myself certified, started my own firm, and that's where we are today. We've been running for 4 years and growing like crazy.
Oh, only 4 years. For me, it seemed a lot longer. But
Yeah, well, I've been in the industry longer,
yeah, yeah,
but as a company, we're,
yeah.
relatively new. I think, why it perhaps presents differently is just the amount of history I've got in the industry, and my team are all people that came over with me from Newland. So
Oh,
these are
yeah.
people that I've known for many years, typically with 14 years experience, 12 years experience. So, we're the small firm that brings all that big firm understanding and skill without all the drama, right? And all the bureaucracy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we both agree that in global mobility, these working with those boutique companies in
Yep,
certain countries, um, like mine, which it's just really a different experience than if you
yep.
work with a big RMC. And obviously, we sometimes, we collaborate with them, and I've had good and other experiences. So, I can say both.
Yes,
But I feel like I think the future will either be something is completely commoditized, it's or replaced by technology, or it will be a boutique, because in the boutique, you get the human touch that we all want,
yep,
and want to see more of in our industry. So if you reflect on that journey of why you started your own company
yep.
in immigration, and also maybe your success factors, what would you advise a more junior person or a more junior version of Ken? Yeah, when you think about, if I started again, what would I do differently today? Or yeah, maybe things that people have misconceptions about. What do you say?
Yeah. One of the things, a little story first, because I
Sure.
love stories. I remember hearing about something that was fairly common practice in some Asian countries where, the family would be interested in buying a new business. Maybe they've got a couple of existing business, maybe they want to expand. And what they would do is they would have one of their people, one of the family, take a job in that company. and work in it for a year before they made any decisions on what they're going to do. And it wouldn't be, and it would be in just, whatever role was appropriate, but they wanted to see the company from the inside,
Mhm.
right? They wanted to, instead of getting, what they get from the war room and a cell package, they wanted to really know how the company operated, what the strengths were, what the weaknesses were. They wanted to understand what it was they were really getting into. So I think there is a lot to be said for anyone starting a business actually working in a couple of different companies. So I get this on a fairly regular basis. Somebody that's maybe they're graduating of a program, they're coming out of law school, and they're like, can we spend a couple of minutes on the phone and you could talk to me about, how I should structure my career? I say, well, okay, sure, happy to, for half an hour, whatever. And what I would normally suggest that they do is start off taking a job in a big corporate, right? Kind of like a Newland or a Deloitte or, whoever, and understand and spend like a year there, right? You're going to get siloed into a particular role, but you're going to get a good grounding on systems. You're going to get a good grounding on how things work in a big corporation, and you're going to see the things that really work and the things that don't work. Chances are you're not going to get a lot of diversity of experience. You're just going to get plugged into one area, and it's going to make you nuts after a year because that's just how they tend to build out. But then from there, go into a smaller firm, right? Into like a boutique firm, as you say.
Yep.
And the reason for doing that is because you'll be worth hiring at that point, right? Because you've got enough experience to bring some value to the company, but you're now going to get a breadth of experience, right? Because in a smaller firm, you get exposure to all kinds of different types of cases. You get to work more closely with people that have been, in the front lines, and they tend to be structured differently, right? So in the bigger firms, they tend to silo and break people down into little areas where one person all day long as you're doing, one or two types of processes or a couple of forms. Well, you don't learn much doing that other than how to do that. When you go into one of these other firms, you're typically working alongside others that are what I would say are 360, kind of like in recruitment, right? We talk about people that are 360 or siloed, right? 360, you're going and getting your own clients, you're getting to know them, then you're going out, finding the candidates, bringing them forward. It's a full cycle. That's pretty standard in a smaller boutique immigration firm as well. They may have, juniors that are helping with some of the admin functions, but you're getting people that are really well-rounded and you want to be that, right? So, I mean, if you're looking to go off on your own, you want to walk down that road. You want to understand what it's like to work with clients and get that kind of exposure. So, I mean, it's not something that I didn't do. I came by all that naturally because I've worked, for some time in large corporate and smaller firms, but I think that's something that for juniors is really worth doing. Starting off cold, who's going to want to engage with you? That's not true in all industries, right? Because I know there's, a lot of startups out there that just blossom and do amazing things.
Hmm.
But I think, if you're coming into an established industry, you probably want to, cut your teeth in a couple of different companies first before you go off on your own, right?
I totally agree with you, Ken.
Oh,
I have to tell you, when I had my business idea, that was in 1996.
wow.
And it was while I was driving back from an interview
Yeah.
with a company that was, sending business travelers to Asian countries and some like Middle East, no, Eastern European countries.
Yeah.
So I wrote a case study for my final thesis. And I was doing these interviews and I thought, wow, there would be so much I could advise them on how to do things better. And then I thought, this would be great to do when I'm a grown up, basically. And
I say
then
that a lot. What do you want
like
to do when you grow up?
consulting those smaller and medium-sized companies
Yeah.
on, it was a typical global mobility topic. The
Yeah.
term didn't exist at the time. Yeah, but then I thought maybe it's better if I get some real life and real work experience
Yeah.
first. And then it took me almost 15 years, to make the decision to finally jump. And I'm grateful for all the experience I had at Deutsche and at PwC and, being
Hmm.
assigned to other countries, working in India, because all of these things, I think they also establish your grit and perseverance. And I really think it was so much easier to start a company with those 15 years in the backpack than not having that experience. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think there's a drive that comes out of that, right? Like when you've been through, I'll call it the corporate grinder for lack of a better
Yeah.
expression, right? Particularly with, the PwCs, the world and so on. And that's no disrespect to the companies, it's just the nature of the beast, right? But they are that,
Yeah.
right? They're machines, right? So, I think, when after you've come through those kinds of experience and then you start your own, you're a lot more driven and motivated, to be successful, right? Like failing is simply not an option.
Mm.
All right. And that was certainly the case for me because when I pulled, like, we're bootstrapped. We had no external funding. This is,
Yeah.
ground up. And, our turnover now would shock a fair number of people, right? And it's in 4 years, just tick, 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 tick. But, there was also stages along the way and things that make sense to me having been through business. But I think if someone's starting is thinking, well, I'll start this, it'll start like this and that's how it's going to run. Well, no, it's not actually. Your phase one is going to be one thing, your phase two is going to be something else, your phase three is going to be something different again. And you need to have that mindset and that flexibility to be able to make those moves. And you also need to be thinking ahead and making sure that you're planning on making those moves, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for having some street experience before you pull the trigger, right?
Mm.
Because
Amazing.
yeah, it's funny though, because I was thinking about that before we got on the call. And the one thing that is a surprise, even for people that have been in business for some time, is how different it is going from having someone hand you the keys to something to, building something from the ground up,
Mm.
right? So, when I took over the role for Newland, which is a funny story in itself, but I mean, it was literally an established operation. It was part of a global entity.
Mhm.
That entity would subsequently go through numerous changes and continues to be. It's like we describe them as the Pac-Man of the industry, right? Just basically snapping up companies. But it's very different coming in when you've got structures already in place and you've got systems in place.
Oh
When you
yeah.
have to build all those from scratch, you come at them differently because you understand what you want, what you don't want, what worked, what didn't work. So you can build something that's very cool, very efficient, very workable, and that the market's going to respond to. But you're doing it all yourself, right? And you can bring in people, and particularly if you're bootstrapping, you're wearing about 15 different hats. And I think that's the toughest thing is, that perpetual juggling, because, at the end of the day, it's all on you, right?
Mm.
So when I say, phase one, phase two, phase three, those are all the iterations you go through as you're building out and you're getting yourself into a specific state, right? And it's graduating to the next level and the next level. And, after 5 or 6 years, maybe you take a vacation.
Mm. Or like a sabbatical.
Yeah, but that's for me, I kind of I blend the two, right? I take business trips. It's like so like everyone's talking about Euro this week. I'm not going because I've got family things this year. It's
Yeah.
the first time I haven't been for some time. But normally, if I'm going to Euro, I'm planning for it. I'm going ahead and I'm booking all the meetings beforehand for, 2 or 3 months. But I'm also building in a week front or back and enjoying things while I'm in that country. So last year, about the whole family was in Dublin, and the whole family came along. So we traipsed around Ireland for a week and had a brilliant time. So you find ways of integrating, right?
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I did a bit of work from anywhere last year,
Oh
and
yeah,
I really tried to take a bit of an easier time and test, how good it would work. And it
sure.
worked actually pretty well, apart from my home country. For some reason, the internet in Germany is not as good as in Pakistan.
Really?
Yeah. Um, so my experience is, don't ever think that things will be easy when, in certain countries. Just don't make any assumptions, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
And be positively surprised by other countries where things work amazingly well. So yeah, but one thing that came to my mind when we were just talking about, the corporate experience,
Yeah.
and one of the things I hadn't mentioned that I think is the key to why I even have a business is the network that we built in that time. And like you, I've always been a fan of social media.
Yeah.
So, and my assumption is that LinkedIn is your favorite because you have 27,000 followers. I almost fell over my chair the other day when I saw that.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about your favorite social media platform and how it helped you grow your business?
Yeah, and I'm gonna roll a bunch of stuff into this, right? So, yes, LinkedIn is my favorite social media platform, broadly. I'm still on Facebook, I'm on
Mhm.
Instagram, and I enjoy those for different reasons. But I also treat social media kind of like an onion, right? So, for me, LinkedIn is kind of the outside piece, the largest piece. Um, and if you like that, that tends to be the more corporate side, and I weave all the personal stuff in there as well, but that's more about branding and connectivity. But then the next layer in is what is Instagram, where you get a little bit more of the personal stuff. You'll see the food shots, you'll see more pictures of the kids and I snowboarding, doing whatever. And then if you get onto Facebook, if you happen to find me there, you're going to find me just talking very frankly about politics and things with my friends. So
Mhm.
you kind of come down to the center, right? Um, and I prefer LinkedIn primarily because I like the format. I'm also on Threads. It's not for me. It's too small. I can't stand Twitter, but I like LinkedIn because it's a community in terms of my network that I've been building. Like I've been on LinkedIn for like 17 years, I think.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, I think I was on there within 2 years of it actually starting. And one of the things I've done, and I've talked about this a fair bit on LinkedIn, is over the years, I've literally added everybody I could into my network, right? So I'd go to a conference and I'd meet people. I get their business cards. I would spend hours connecting with them on LinkedIn, right? Making sure I got them done. New colleagues. I travel the world with a Newland or an Air Energy or an Air Swift. Same thing. I'd be, connecting with every single person and making sure I had them on LinkedIn because it's a live Rolodex, right? I mean, no matter
Yeah.
where people go, you're always connected to them. So if you were to analyze my followers and my connections on LinkedIn, they would literally go back to the early days and they would trace throughout my career. But what's cool about that is that, people that, I may have worked with on a recruitment level years ago are now leading their own companies, right? They're doing this, they're doing that, and they become not just followers, but they become good friends and they become people you interact with and they become potentially clients, right? So to your point, I'm 27,000 followers or something ridiculous, but it's because I'm very conscious about building that.
Yeah.
And I also spend a bit of time every week. I mean, I'm a terrible sleeper. So, I get up at oftentimes at 5 and, one morning I'll just connect with, 50 people that are in the snowboarding industry or that are in Patagonia, or maybe I'm focusing on COOs in a particular consulting segment, but consciously building out those networks, and it pays dividends, right? And it's a bit of work in terms of generating content, but when you consider that something like, I think the stat is what, it's only 1% of people on LinkedIn actually create content,
Yeah, I heard
right?
number two. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
I'm in the
you know
1%.
what's that?
I think I'm in the 1%.
I'm sure I am. And I go through peaks and valleys in terms of how
Yeah.
much I post, but it's a platform where I can trace back very clearly client activity from my activity,
Yeah.
right? And people are like, well, how do you prove the ROI? Well, it's pretty obvious to me because I start getting inquiries, people reaching out to me via, DM and LinkedIn, and then I move them across to email and off we go. Or it's somebody, that reaches out to me like this yesterday, in fact, a guy you see me interacting with quite a bit, Seth, reached out to me and said, hey, listen, by the way, I actually have another referral for you, X, Y, and Z. But again, it's because of contacts I've just built up from interactions over time. And, Seth and I have become good sparring partners and friends but I also know very clearly what his business model is and, who he can help, and same with me. So there's a great opportunity for us to send clients we can't help in certain ways to each other. And that's really what LinkedIn is for me, is it's a giant referral network, right? And
Yeah.
that's an active one. And you're just really staying top of mind and, trying not to sell, but provide people information about what you do so that if they do at some point in their life have a need, they know who to reach out to. And oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's Kenneth, that snowboarding immigration guy in Canada. He seems smart. Let's go talk to him. Right?
Yeah. I mean, you're my first go-to person when it comes to Canada. It's like
But
you're on my mind.
I know, but that's the key, right? Like it's for me, that's the thing with LinkedIn is, trying to maintain the consistency. And I'm not gonna lie to you. Well, if you're active, you know, but it's hard to be consistent all the time. In a
Absolutely.
perfect world, you're posting, 3 times a week at very specific times, yada, yada, yada. But, I think if you're at least posting on a fairly regular basis, then you stay there, right? And, if you have a very clear identity, you're easily spotted, and people will follow and enjoy. And it's just such a treat when, people say, yeah, I know I've been following you on LinkedIn. I really enjoy your posts. And I don't even think about it. Some people agonize over every word in a post, like basically pounding stuff out because it shouldn't, it's all fairly ephemeral anyways. You shouldn't kill a whole ton of time on it, and if over time you just become fairly adept at doing things quickly for LinkedIn, and I find it's a pretty rewarded platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, is there any event coming up from your company or anything that you can talk about that would be interesting for our viewers here? We're
Yeah,
obviously going to link to your company, etc., in the profile, but is there anything else that you want to talk about?
yeah, not a great deal. I mean, for people that follow me know that we're business immigration primary, but we also do individual work. But they tend to relate, right? So, we tend to work with our corporate clients and then help them, get their permanent residency and similar.
Mhm.
Um, Perhaps what might be interesting to folks that don't know me that well is that aside from having our own firm, this is how we connected, right? When we were talking about Vanessa,
Mhm.
we built up or co-founded a group called Partners Immigration, which is a global immigration organization. And I call it an organization because it's not a company, um, although it certainly is a legal entity, but it's a group of like-minded immigration professionals from around the world that are band together based on similarities in outlook and approach. And I'll say that, but the key element is that we tend to be the companies in countries that the RMCs would use if they need somebody in that location, right? So, or another large global law firm may not have capacity in Luxembourg, so they go to my friend Stefan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the network is really designed to help us all punch above our weight. So, with partners, I can compete very clearly with a Newland Chase or a Fragment or anybody else because I have a global network that I can very quickly refer one of my clients to, and they're going to be connected from me to an owner, right? As opposed to going through some sort of channel to get to somebody. And
Mhm.
it's an organization you can't just buy your way into. It's a group where you have to be recommended and you have to be nominated, and then you get vetted. People have had to have already worked with you and have trust in you, right? So they tend to be, if you look at the roster, if you're in the industry, you're going to recognize everybody because they're kind of the go-tos in those countries if you know the industry well, right? So there are
Mhm.
those really, really strong local firms that, people would look at it going, yeah, well, Lena in Sweden, she's like the go-to for Sweden, period. Well, she's in our group. She's one of our directors, right? So that's a cool thing that people should be aware of. So, if you need help in a country, and it's not Canada, you can still come to me and I can get you connected with them very quickly.
Oh, that's a
But
very good point. Thanks, Ken, for mentioning that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay, great. Well, thanks for your time. It's
yeah, it's
been
good fun.
amazing talking to you, and I look forward to connecting with you again.
Yeah, and it's nice to
Yes.
actually see the red couch.
Yeah. Today it's so late that the sun is coming in from this angle that we hardly ever get that. So yeah,
And that's my fault. Thanks for
no,
accommodating me.
it's fine.
Appreciate that.
It's
Okay.
fine.
Well, you
Thank
have a lovely weekend when you get to it,
Thank
Angie. It
you.
was lovely
Will
speaking again.
do. Have a
Okay.
great
Take care.
time. Bye,
Bye.
Ken. Bye.